Hello everyone, my name is Amanda Pfeiffer. I am an education coordinator at the Canadian Light Source. We're here with another staff member in our series where we're interviewing different careers across the facility. Before we get to that though, I would like to acknowledge that the Canadian Light Source, which is in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, is located on Treaty 6 land in the traditional territories of the Nehiyawak, Anishinaabe, Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota nations, and the homeland of the Métis. And as educators, we respect Indigenous ways of knowing and oral traditions. And as we are meeting with different staff members and connecting to different classrooms across Canada and the globe, that we are moving forward in a spirit of partnership, reconciliation, and collaboration. And I encourage you to take the time to think about your own relationship to Indigenous peoples and the land. So with that, I'm going to get Tim to further introduce yourself, tell us what you do at the facility and what your job title is.
Hi, I'm Tim May. I'm a senior scientist at the Canadian Light Source, and at the moment I'm supporting a couple of the Beamline scientists on particular beamlines that are working in the infrared rather than the X-rays. So I originally moved to CLS as a project manager beamline scientist to design and build both of the infrared beamlines, and have continued on. That's what I'm doing now.
Cool. So can you talk a little bit more about infrared? Because a lot of our students tend to come in and use ideas which uses X-rays. So what is, in a nutshell, infrared and how does it apply to CLS?
Yeah, the infrared is on the other side of the visible spectrum. When you're talking the X-rays, they're very short wavelengths, very penetrating high energy radiation. And infrared is very low energy radiation. It's actually what you feel is heat. So out on a warm sunny day, a lot of the energy you're feeling as warmth is infrared. And when you get shorter and higher energies, you get into the UV, which causes your sunburn. But the nice warm stuff and hot water and hot air is infrared. And it turns out that that's an indication of vibrational motion in the molecules around you. Your body is warm, you're actually an infrared emitter, and it's all these molecular vibrations that create heat as a sensation, but they're also very characteristic of the chemicals that are warm, and water and carbon materials, sugars, fats, proteins. They all have vibrations in the infrared that are characteristic of what they are, and so that it's very useful information that you can analyze spectroscopically. And so the light source, the synchrotron, can provide infrared as a very bright spot so that we can look at small samples and determine what their chemical makeup is based on molecular vibrations rather than atomic transitions. So in a nutshell, IR is the warm science.
I'd say cool, but I guess I mean hot or warm.
Yeah, cool's okay.
Okay. So you mentioned that you help support different scientists doing that. So can you kind of elaborate what does a typical day of work look like for you?
Yes, well, I was originally brought on the team to design and help fabricate and commission the beamlines. I'm more of an optical designer and physicist, interested in the instrumentation rather than the actual spectroscopy. I understand the spectroscopy, but I like to make the equipment that gives the information to the scientist. So my job now is to support the scientist, but originally I was doing optical design, figuring out how to get the light from the source in the ring over to the sample. And both of the beamlines, one operates at longer wavelengths, one at shorter wavelengths, and they look in microscopic domains in small sample sizes or at very high resolving power. And so putting together the optics was my first big job. There was a 5-year plan to get a beamline design. I have a picture here. I flash this up here. Let's see if I can get it to make sense with the lighting here. But at any rate, there's a big pile of tubes going from the ring size source and then reflecting the light out through a large concrete wall that shields us from the X-rays, and then on through some other mirror bounces over to where the spectrometer is located. And setting up this kind of design, working with mechanical designers and vacuum designers, it's not all me. I have to work in a team with a bunch of other people to get all this stuff put together on computer systems, design worked out. Here's a kind of a picture of how some of that tubing actually looks. I don't know if that's in focus or not, but anyway, these vacuum pipes, how I have to get bolted together and evacuated with special pumps and put together with the optics inside them to be able to provide the light. So basically, I'm an optical designer, although I have a physics background, and I'm just very interested in instrumentation and providing things that make the devices work. The mirrors we use are specially coated to reflect infrared. You're used to a really bright aluminum shiny mirror surface, something like this, that has a very bright metallic look, right? Very clear white. And this will reflect infrared, but to get a little better reflection in the infrared, we use something that has a higher conductivity, and that's gold. And these mirrors are shaped specially to refocus the light. It's hard to see with this lighting in this room right now, but this is a particular type of mirror that brings light in down to a very fine focus, called a parabolic mirror. And it's using these different types of mirror surfaces that we have to use in the beam pipe to get the light from one point over to the sample. And we use a standard infrared microscope used in commercial laboratories and in science laboratories. There's instruments been made for many decades now. I started out from grad school working for an infrared instrument maker. Worked there for 14 years and got to know a lot about the instrumentation and business in general. And they were making microscopes to look at samples on a very small scale. It gets harder and harder to look at smaller and smaller things because you have less light that you can get into an area on a sample. But people wanted to look at things like tissue samples down to the individual cells in plants and animals, looking at roots or skin cells, various things to determine the health or the operation of biological samples. So that's a big interest at CLS on the mid-IR. And it takes some special optics to get the light down into a small spot. You're kind of familiar maybe with normal microscope objectives, but for the infrared, you can't go through glass. Glass will actually absorb a lot of the light that we want to have to get the infrared spectrum out. So we have special mirrored objectives. And again, I'm not sure how this is going to show up, but these are very special mirrors inside here. There's a small mirror in the front and then a large mirror in the back that allows us to bring the light in at a very high angle onto the sample. It's almost like a telescope for small stuff. We may have to edit this later, I don't know. But the light that gets brought in here is transformed into a really small spot at the output of this objective. It's normally sitting in a microscope like this. Your sample's down below it, and you can analyze what's going on in your material. You can either bounce the light off of the sample or have the light come through. There'd be an objective underneath, so the light would penetrate through and you could find a spectrum of your sample. And this is a big value to chemists, biologists, material scientists, quite an array of users that come in to take advantage of the infrared microscope. As well, there's other types of materials that get analyzed as solids and as liquids and as gases. Different techniques apply. So doing that kind of design work, getting the interfaces, the things that hold the actual samples, and keep the noise down, help improve the data collection. That's what I get involved with. So there's usually somebody wants something done. We come up with a design plan. I help organize who's needed to put that together, what it's going to cost, sketch the optical layout. And if we decided we can get it funded and go with it, we start a whole procedure for doing a project. And I like getting involved with that. I like seeing things getting made and used. So that's pretty much what I try to do here. After I've built this thing, I've stayed on to help support the guys improve the Beamlines over time. There's always new techniques coming, and we want to try to stay up to date with the latest science methods and keep the users happy with what they want to try to measure.
Yeah, I never realized how intricate that actually really is, and that's interesting. And yeah, hopefully the optics, the mirrors that you showed are good when we display the video.
We'll see. Yeah, it's the lighting here. Well, I was thinking about it this morning. What would I show? So here we go.
Yeah, no, we'll make it work. you were talking about your grad studies, and perhaps you can think a little bit further back to high school. I was wondering,
Mhm.
was there any classes or knowledge that you took in high school that applies now? And I'm sure one will be physics, but is there
Oh,
anything
yes.
else?
Yeah, there was several classes actually that had a big impact on my interest in engineering and science, and also my career, because uh, in high school you could kind of select topics, which I thought was great after grade school, and I got involved with shop classes. I liked working with wood and then metal, learned how to run a lathe and make a power mower work. We had a power mechanics shop, and also drafting, learning how to actually draw something and that you could actually make or give to somebody to have them make for you. And the drafting information has stood me in really good stead throughout my career, and knowing how to work metal, and those were really good. Also, I took a rhetoric course in English, which I found also very useful because it taught me how to analyze what people say and understand, are they telling the truth or are they kind of edging me on here? So anyway, that was another useful thing, because you're always communicating when you're dealing in the real world and working and trying to interact with people. You really want to communicate well and understand what's being said or presented to you. So at any rate, it helped me learn how to present thoughts. And so that was quite useful. My senior year, I took some welding courses, and that was really very beneficial because for the next 4 summers, I did welding in the summer, and it paid most of my costs of college education. I went to the University of Wisconsin, and in the summers I did welding and living at home with my folks. But yeah, 90% or so of my tuition and costs of going to school came from welding, working on a production line, making automotive equipment. So that was also very nice because I got to learn how to work with other people and do a nice project. And I enjoy working with my hands and learning how a lot of this stuff gets done in the real world, machining parts and putting parts together and working with tools and other people. So getting up at 6 in the morning for a 7 o'clock shift start, that was tough in the summer, but okay. Made good
Yeah.
money at it. And so that was quite beneficial. And from grad school or from undergraduate school, I actually wanted to be an electrical engineer. I like electrical circuits. I was just fascinated with switches and turning things on and off and moving things with motors and learning radio and things like that. And as I went on in my electrical engineering classes, I got more and more interested in the physics classes that I was taking as part of it. Math and physics were very big in the curriculum. And so I decided to switch to a physics major, and then went on to graduate school to learn acoustics. I like musical acoustics, so how do musical instruments work, guitars, organs, and clarinets and things. So in a couple of years, I got working in grad school. Managed to earn a fellowship and spent 2 years in Cleveland at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. After that, I was trying to decide, did I want to continue in acoustics or surface science? I had a couple different things going on there, and decided to work for a year with an instrument maker. And after the first year, I said, oh, maybe I'll spend one more year here and go back for my PhD. And then the third year, I said, maybe I'll go back. And then I realized, no, I'm not going back. I was having too much fun working out in industry. So I never did complete my degree, but who knows, maybe when I retire, I'll go back and finish up.
Oh, that's interesting about acoustics and how. So, how did you end up at CLS?
Well, the saga continues. I like vibrations. Acoustics is vibrations of air and mechanical parts and pieces. The body of a violin has to vibrate properly, or drum heads, and vibrational things just intrigue me. How does this work? How do things radiate? How do we hear? I was really fascinated by this, or seeing things. Photons are vibrations as well. And so I went to work for this infrared instrument maker because I like instruments. It's electronic, and also studying with molecular vibrations, which was another area of interest, things that vibrate. So I worked there for almost 14 years, and the company got bought out by another company. And within a year, I was downsized because they were more interested in making profits than keeping a lot of people around making the instruments. So that kicked me out of a career that I was really happy with. I was a little disappointed, but within a year or so, I was hired at the University of Wisconsin because the guy that hired me there, Ruben Reininger, had been to a workshop in Calgary. I was in Madison, Wisconsin, but he had come up to Canada to see this conference related to synchrotrons. He worked at the synchrotron at the University of Wisconsin, the Synchrotron Radiation Center just outside Madison, Wisconsin. And at this conference, he met a scientist named Gwyn Williams, who was talking about doing infrared on the synchrotrons out at Brookhaven in Long Island, New York, a big national laboratory in the United States. So my boss hadn't been aware of doing infrared and decided he wanted to put an infrared beamline at the SRC in Madison, Wisconsin at the UW. And I just happened to see an ad that he'd put out wanting to have somebody knowing infrared build a beamline. And I said, I got to try that because I know infrared and I'm looking for work because I had been downsized out of Nicolay Instruments. And boy, they hired me, and it was quite an intriguing setup. I was just impressed with the laboratory there, lots of equipment, vacuum stuff, just lots of metal and shiny things. And I was familiar with ultra-high vacuum, having done some graduate work on surface science. So it's like, oh, this is a kid in a toy store here. I just want to have some fun doing this, and trying to design that was just what I was familiar with. So it took about 2 years to get the beamline running there, and we got it up and running and successful. So that was pretty good. And then things moved on, and I heard that the Canadians were going to be building their own synchrotron. There were 4 beamlines being run at the SRC that were Canadian operated, and I was familiar with Mike Bancroft and Kim Tan and several people that were running beams down there, and understanding that they were going to get funding for the CLS. So I just bided my time, and when they came up with the plan to build it, they wanted to have infrared in one of their first phases of beamlines. So I said, well, I'll apply for that. I've always wanted to see what Canada was like, and I figured I'd see the Canadian Rockies outside my office window and life would be really good, and help get one set up here. And they hired me in 2000. So I started here to build the infrared beamlines here. And that was going to be a 5-year project, just getting them up and running. And then see what happens after that. I told them, look, I'm not going to be able to run the beamlines. I'm not a spectroscopist, but I'll be happy to get things up and running. And so this 5-year project has turned into 21 years now, and not much longer. I may be retiring soon, but at any rate, that's how I ended up coming to Canada and working at the Canadian Light Source in Saskatoon.
That's pretty remarkable how your path kind of changed. And
yeah, you can't predict once you're in grad school or high school or even college where will you end up. But so far it's been nice. And the one nice thing about Canada is that I basically speak the language, and people can tell that I'm from the Midwest, not necessarily from here, but at any rate, I didn't have to learn a new language to work here. And that was somewhat beneficial. Although there have been times I wish I knew French or Spanish or some other language, German, Japanese, because working in a synchrotron, it's quite international, and there are times when I really wish I could just be more fluent to communicating with other people that way. At any rate.
Yeah, definitely. And it's
forgive me, I'm drinking in the middle of this.
No, that's all good. It's an interesting idea about like you said, the international and diversity and just the different people that come through the facility, or you're connecting virtually.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever get to see the Rockies?
Oh, I've been there a number of times. I try to go there every chance I get. I've been a member of the bicycling club here, the Horizon 100, and they have summer trips out there to do biking around various places, and I go on all those as often as I can get. And yeah, love it out there. Really nice.
Good. Yeah, so kind of switching gears, thinking more about working at the facility, are there any hazards or safety concerns that you encounter, and how do you deal with them?
Well, safety is something that's discussed. It's always brought up at meetings as something to be kept mindful of, because there are some hazards here. For the type of work I do, we use lasers for various things to align things, whereas light sources to help excite the sample to do other analysis. So we have to be careful to wear the right kind of goggles to block off that light, and signage and power levels. You have to be aware of this stuff before you start working with it while you do it. Pardon me. We also move equipment around, so I wear steel-toed shoes just because you're moving heavy equipment with a pallet jack or something. You don't want to damage your feet and things like that. And of course, there's a lot of electrical power in various places and with various equipment, so you got to be mindful of not getting yourself electrocuted. But that type of tinkering, I don't do that much inside the equipment that way. But there are electricians here that take care of a lot of this stuff, plumbing and whatnot. So the radiation hazards is something that's just unique to accelerators, and they do a lot of effort to keep things shielded and interlocked, so you can't get someplace where there's radiation unless everything's shut off. So I've never had to worry about that. We wear a little badge that monitors our dosage, and if you go to the dentist, you'll get more in an x-ray there than you'll see in a year here with this thing out in the open. So not too worried about it, but you do want to be careful of mindful of what you're doing. Chemicals are used as well, and some of the solvents can be nasty. You want to be gloved up or whatever, use things in a fume hood so you're not breathing things in properly. Yeah, there are things going on here, but you just pay attention and don't be in a hurry, and things will be good.
Yep, that is very true. Kind of similar question. And you talked a lot about you like working with your hands and kind of tinkering with things. And I imagine there's a lot of problem solving that kind of goes with that. Is there anything kind of like that you find stressful, and how do you manage that stress?
Well, generally the stress comes from time, having time constraints. You've got a deadline to get something done. Somebody's expecting a report, or a user's coming on Monday, and you've got to have the beamline turned around from some previous experimental setup, maybe a shift before they show up. So you've got to switch things around late on a Sunday evening to get ready for a Monday morning or something to that effect. So that can get a little frantic. We run 24 hours when the beam is on. So sometimes you get calls late in the evening for something that's not working right. The user's having troubles, and you try to come in and get them up and running again so they don't lose the midnight to 8 shift. Because the beam time is really valuable, and you want them to get good data. So that's a stressor when you're running into problems that you got to solve on the spot. And so being able to think on your feet and just relax while the pressure is on, and sometimes you can't fix it. And we've had several shutdowns here because major pieces of equipment have had problems, and it's like, sorry, nothing we can do about it. So you try not to let it get to you, but for me, time pressures seem to be the biggest problem in terms of a stressor.
Yeah. So kind of on the flip side, what do you really enjoy about your position?
Oh, I like working with the people. We get a lot of different types of people coming in that have lots of different ideas. And the one thing I've really noticed is you're generally working with a lot of bright people. The staff here are very enthusiastic, energetic, and have ideas of how to do things or improve things. But the users coming and going are really looking at very interesting aspects of nature and science, and want to solve problems or understand things. And that they're curiosity driven, they're energized, and they really want to do some good things in the world in various fields of endeavor. And just interacting with people like that, it energizes me to help them get the best data and do good work. And that's one thing I really like. And I enjoy working with my hands. I like putting things together and seeing something as a result of it that you can say, hey, we made that and it's working. And that also gives me a big kick, the design and actual construction of things. So interacting with people and with my hands, having to think and communicate it all it's a good time.
Yeah, kind of all comes together.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite experience or a favorite project that you worked on?
Oh man, there's been so many of them.
You can say all of them.
Well, some of the stuff is more fun than others because some of it's, you're kind of speculating that something's going to improve things. You get something going to a certain level, and then you realize, oh, we've got this vibrational problem here. There's a signal in the noise that we got to get rid of, and then trying to find that out, investigating that thing, and sorting it out that it's this and not that. We had to change some mirror mounts because they were shaking, and it's like, well, glad we got that figured out, because it was really a headache for finding this noise inside the middle of somebody's data set. So working with that over time and improving things has been a lot of fun. I did some work with something called active optics, where the optical system is adjusting itself as a result of finding noise and vibration. So I learned about these things, which were used on these mirror mounts. This is another one of these gold, back here where you can see it, one of these gold mirror mounts. This is a gold mirror, and it's in a mechanical framework that you can adjust the, if you were looking at this mirror sideways here somewhere, it has to tilt and it has to go side to side. So you can adjust the beam. A beam is coming and bouncing off of this, and you want to steer it up and down and left and right somewhere further down the beam pipe. And to do that, you'd have some mechanical adjusters that get you roughed in there. But over time, things drift. The temperature in the ring shifts, and the building, things can move around just because of thermal expansion and contraction. Well, this has a special device in the back called a Piezoelectric Transducer that can actually actuate the mirror. It has the ability to twist in two directions via an electronic signal that's fed in through this cable. And so when you have this thing micro-tuned by this little adjuster system, you can have a sensor that says, oh, you're drifting off to one side or the other, and I'm going to make a correction to keep you centered on this sensor. And this active optics has been very valuable to be able to do the microscopy, to keep the light on a very tiny spot, even though the ring is changing temperature, beams drifting and whatnot, and mechanical vibrations up to a certain frequency. This thing can keep the beam precisely positioned in the microscope. So over a 4 or 8 hour shift of taking data, the beam doesn't fall off of the point in the sample that they want to measure. So this stuff was real interesting to me to learn here, and had not seen that before working at the CLS. So I would say in general, that was a highlight in terms of learning how to get that designed and implemented. So
yeah.
Cool stuff.
Yeah, and it's good for you to share those examples with us or for students that are watching. I don't know if they always think of how intricate and detailed beamlines are, and how, you come and do your experiment, but there's so much background work that goes into being able to run those scans that it's interesting to hear like these examples, and hopefully students can connect more to those ideas of how complicated these beamlines really are.
It's true. I mean, we try to keep things as simple for the user as possible. Here's the light, concentrate on you're doing your experiment and not have to worry about the problems with getting the beam down there. But some of them are interested in knowing more about that, because sometimes they have ideas for ways they want to manipulate the light differently for their next experiment. So there's some interplay with some of the users that are more interested, and certainly some of the beamline scientists are more interested in the instrument design and development of the beamline, or various parts of it that they're also interested in, besides the analysis, the crystallography, the spectroscopy and whatnot. And so different types of people operating different ways, but yeah, a lot is involved to get this bright light actually out and onto people's samples.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other, there's a lot of technical stuff. We have floor staff keeping the place tidy, and we have people organizing the proposals. There's a whole process for getting your experiment reviewed, and we have outside reviewers. I mean, there's a lot of financial help with different departments, people buying and selling things for us and receiving stuff, technical people at all different levels. So it's a big team working to get the light out to the users here.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And two, like the one thing I really like is like there always is something to learn, and even with just those positions that you described, like getting to acquire knowledge in those departments is only going to help your user experience better, and it's no day is the same. Is how I find it.
Yeah, it's quite varied. Quite varied.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you asked what a typical day was like, it's like, wow, I come into the office, I do a lot of things, and then I go home.
Yeah.
But the computer's involved quite a bit with it as well. Everything's getting recorded or modeled up or interacted with, emails, different interactions that you do. Well, now it's really vital to have the computers with the video monitoring for communications while we're trying to keep them getting sick. And so that a lot of computer interactions, you're going to want to get real familiar with running software. And I think this generation coming up now is much more familiar with the software than when I started. They weren't around like this.
Yeah. Wrapping kind of things up here now, do you have any words of advice for the next generation coming up in terms of like when they're looking for a career?
Well, yeah, when you're thinking about a career, I would say really just try a bunch of different things out to find out what you're really interested in, because for me, there's so many things moving on. I would love to have gotten into computer coding, but I had other interests with mechanical and electrical things. Artistic things, making music was of an interest for a while, and then I realized, well, my voice is no good. I'm not that great a musician. So, but there's many different aspects to science and studying nature. If you really want to get involved with studying nature or science and various technical issues like that, just realize that that's what you're really interested in. You have some curiosity and some interest and some drive. You want to be able to persevere. If you run into difficulties, go seek out help. And, if you really want to answer a tough question, it's going to take some effort. And the easy questions have already been answered. So now you're working on tougher ones. And as science goes on, answering one question leads to more questions. Usually the cutting edges of research now are just broader and broader questions that have more and more questions leading into them or coming out of them. And just because you've answered one theory or scientific need doesn't mean you're going to be done. There's going to be more things coming. So thinking long term, you really want to do something that you like doing, because you're going to spend years doing it. I'm looking at a 41-year career at this stage of the game, and I've been lucky in that I've been able to be interested in working at places I really wanted to work at. So if you're looking at different places to work and want to interview, study the company or the organization and see what it is they do, and see what skills you have will help them do what they want to do, because that's the best situation, that you're valued there and you're interested in doing it and willing to persevere at doing it. So that's my advice. And try to learn as much math and science and technical stuff. I like technical stuff, but don't neglect some of the other sciences and arts, just to help your background be rounded out for other ideas.
Yeah, that's a really good point to think about for students, and hopefully they can remember that, because especially now, like you were saying about the technology and how it keeps evolving, and like knowing coding and knowing math and things like that is only going to help push you a bit further. But like you also said too, definitely being interested in what you do is going to be key into having an enjoyable career. Yeah.
And seek out good teachers. I mean, the classes that stick out in my mind were teachers that I really got a charge out of. They helped enthuse me on doing things that they had an interest in what they were teaching, and interest in me and the students for getting us to know things. And so that really helped a lot too, and talk with them, find out what's the real scoop with different topics and how to get ahead or where to go to get more information. Stay curious.
Yes, that's a good sentiment, I think, Anna, to end on. So just want to say thank you for taking the time to talk to us and share your story. And it's definitely interesting hearing a completely different perspective from somebody at the CLS working with the optics and things like that. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Amanda. Good luck to you all.